Julian Assange will be waiting a bit longer to learn whether he will be extradited to America after legal proceedings in the UK wrapped up early this morning, local time. Greg Barnes, SC, has been advising Julian and his family for the last 12 years, and he joins us now in the studio. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
Good. Could be a final chapter in what has been quite a distressing and long-running case for Julian and his family. Have you had a chance to speak with him in the previous weeks and days?
I've been talking with his father and with his brother and staying in close touch with London. The one last appeal that he might have would be to the European Court, but there is a real risk that straight after the decision they'd whisk him away to the United States, put him on a plane.
So what do you... We had the American side of the story, for want of a better expression, in court overnight. The Americans still pursuing extradition, claiming that by releasing all those names unredacted, lives were put at risk. The American lawyers said people, in fact, disappeared as a result of those classified documents being made public, and the argument being these weren't the actions of what would be considered a normal journalist.
Well, look, they've been rebutted, Michael, by the lawyers for Julian overnight. And, of course, in relation to Chelsea Manning, particularly in the release of material, there was evidence led in Manning's trial which indicated that that wasn't the case. And, in fact, the Australian Department of Defence looked at this and came up with nothing. So that is, you know, very much in dispute and would be in dispute in the United States.
We heard from Andrew Wilkie a little earlier in the program. He's been involved in the case for a long time also. What impact do you think the Australian government's shifting position could potentially have on diplomatic relations? Do you know whether or not Australia is making representations behind the scenes to the UK government and to the US government?
Well, there's certainly been a lift in representations. I mean, Stephen Smith, the High Commissioner in London, has seen Julian on 2 occasions now. As we know, the Prime Minister said last week he's raised this on a number of occasions with the Biden administration, as has Penny Wong and Mark Dreyfus. And there's no doubt that the political campaign we've been running in Australia has had success. We saw last week an 86-42 vote in the Parliament, which is very significant, and that's something that the United States has to take into account. Because at the end of the day, this is no ordinary extradition case. This is a political case. And, you know, it requires a political solution, which is something Andrew Wilkie's been saying for a long time, and he's right.
But if anything, what we heard from the American lawyers overnight was a hardening of the Americans' position. So realistically, Greg, what hope do you have of there being a behind-the-scenes resolution to this that would see Julian Assange coming back to Australia?
Well, one of the things the Americans have said, of course, is that if he got a sentence, and I think they said as low as 63 months, which we don't believe, but if that were right, he could come back to Australia.
To serve that sentence.
To serve that sentence in Australia. You know, the view is that it's going to be much longer he faces because American sentencing is so disproportionate. But in terms of the political solution, this is, of course, an issue that goes to the alliance. I mean, Australia has done everything it can in relation to the Asia-Pacific region. And we also need to remember, as you would, the David Hicks case, where it was said that Hicks was going to be stuck in Guantanamo, and of course the Howard government brought him back. So, you know, there'd been a shift in position in that case on the part of the Bush administration.
Julian's health, how is it, and have you got fears for his well-being during this process?
Well, he didn't attend the hearing for 2 days, and I think that tells you something. The longer you stay in Belmarsh prison, which is a really tough prison, the more likely it is that your health's going to continue to deteriorate. And there is a view, and it's a view expressed with knowledge, that if he went to the United States, given the way in which prisoners are treated, he could die.
You being a lawyer, you have more knowledge about this potentially than any of us here. So the judges have reserved their decision in the High Court over there. Any idea, based on precedent past cases, how long we'll be waiting for a judgment?
It's hard to know, Michael. In fact, there are going to be further written submissions by March 3, so you won't get a decision before March 3.
OK, right.
So, look, it could be any time. I mean, it's unusual for them to set aside 2 days for what's called a leave to appeal. And, of course, if he wins that, he then goes to a full appeal, which would be some point later in this year.
And if that fails, which European court could he potentially take the case to?
He could take it to the European Court of Human Rights. And the expectation is that he'd do well there. But look, I think that you know, the English, I speak to a couple of English barristers regularly who've got experience in this area who say to me that there's been a shift in the United Kingdom in terms of not relying on assurances by the United States, and that was one of the points, that they're just assurances about how they would treat him. They're not enforceable as a matter of law.